A win to end the year. Arsenal moved to second place in the Premier League with their sights set on Liverpool with a big second half of the campaign to come. This is the Arsenal Raw Reaction Show. Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back with you guys and girls for another episode of what is the Arsenal Raw Reaction Show. Joining you the morning after, the night before, as we discuss Arsenal's 1-0 win over Ipswich Town in the Premier League. A more difficult game than I think that perhaps most of us expected, and certainly a fixture that will not go down in the history books with anything of real note, except the fact, of course, that it was a very important 3 points to grab. We're going to talk about all that and more in today's game. But good morning to those joining us in the chat box. Very much appreciate you all being here. Runs with Cows, Trader Mike, Naz, Maximius. We've got Rich and Black Shine and Stevie. Good morning to Runs with Cows and Jurgen and Paul. Good morning to you guys. Amira, Steve Stone we've got in the chat box as well this morning. Barry and A1. We've got Jimmy. We've got Paul. And we've got Vivian. We've got CM, Kahinde. We've got Mohammed. And plenty more of you guys and girls joining us too. I also want to give a shout out, because it made me laugh yesterday, to a couple of supporters that said hello yesterday who listen every morning from Hastings as well. So just give a shout out to the Sussex Arsenal supporters group. As a regular visitor of Hastings and the local area down there on the south coast, it was great to hear that the show is spreading to these parts of South England. So that was really nice to see and to hear as well. And thank you to everybody else, of course, that tunes in. So nice when people come up and say hello and say they love the show and really appreciate it. So thank you to everybody that's this year has said hello. It's been a great year overall, and we've done some exciting things, and hopefully 2025 will be even more exciting as well. Right, let's jump into these stories. Please make sure you drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new. I can see Earl is keeping track of the likes on the show already, so please do make sure you've dropped a like on the video as well. Right, speaking of which, let's have a bit of a chat, shall we? We will, of course, I think, not be remembering too much from this game if it is to be talked about again in the future. It was a win, and that's what matters the most. You get the 3 points, you move on. And during a period where, we're going to be, are currently and going to be without one of our most key figures in the side in Bukayo Saka, it's going to take a little while, I think, before we manage to kind of grab that and grab the initiative. But I've never seen quite such dominance, especially in the first 25 minutes. It got to 25 minutes into the game, and Arsenal had 92% possession. I perhaps haven't seen Arsenal be so dominant for a period of a game without necessarily getting the goals that dominance deserved in quite some time. We do dominate teams and we do dominate possession, but it was a pure Arsenal first kind of quarter of the match, and we obviously did create some chances that were not taken during the game, but ultimately we come up with the 3 points in the end. Now the lineup, I think, if anything, showcased exactly the main issues and the main shortcomings of what we have right now, with both Bukayo Saka and Raheem Sterling out injured at the moment. Arsenal fielded a side that included Havertz, Martinelli, Trossard, and Gabriel Jesus. And that meant that there was no recognised forward on the bench whatsoever. Ethan Nwaneri was the only attacking option that Arsenal really had to be able to bring off the bench. And he didn't come off the bench at all. We actually only made 2 substitutions in this game. Thomas Partey and Mikel Merino coming off the bench throughout the game. Merino replacing Jesus with Havertz, moving into those attacking positions. Declan Rice starting, as I wanted to see, in the defensive midfield position, with the back four of Lewis Skelly, Gabriel Saliba and Timber. Believe it or not, Arsenal had as many as 4 left-backs on the bench. And despite having 4 left-backs on the bench, Lewis Skelly still started and completed the game against Ipswich. I thought he did very well, actually, Lewis Skelly, throughout the game, and I was impressed by his performance. But it was a first half and a performance overall, I think, where Ipswich Town, I think, probably looked at the performance of Everton as a bit of a methodology about how they were going to approach things, hit on the counter, but sit deep and try and come for a point. And as Arsenal failed to do against Everton, it was always going to be about how we broke them down and also trying to break them down without Bukayo Saka. Now, that goal, of course, came courtesy of Kai Havertz, who scored yet again in an Arsenal shirt. Right place at the right time, getting into position and finishing off the opportunity. That, of course, takes this season's goal tally to 12. He is still one more game before the halfway mark, but is on now for a 20 goal plus season across all competitions as well, which is, all we can really ask for. He remains Arsenal's top scorer at this stage also. And it was a really good move, actually, that began with a cross from the right-hand side from Gabriel Martinelli, which then led to Leandro Trossard picking up the ball, beating his man before playing the perfect, driven, slightly aired cross to Havertz, who just basically had to tap it home. And it felt like at times Arsenal wanted to, walk the ball into the net, and there was a reluctance almost at times to take the shots. And despite the fact that we had opportunities still, and there were some opportunities for Jesus, there was an opportunity for Odegaard, there was an opportunity for Trossard, there was an opportunity for Rice. Marino had a good chance in the second half as well. It's not like we didn't create chances, but Arsenal just didn't really manage to create a sense that they were really battering the Ipswich goal at any stage. It felt very conservative. It felt very controlled. And that's what we've come to expect. That said, I think some of the discourse in response to the game has been quite ridiculous, because this is the first game that Arsenal have started without Bukayo Saka. Mikel Arteta spoke ahead of the game in the press conference saying that Arsenal are going to have to learn to play differently. The idea that there would be this expectation that Arsenal would suddenly click without Bukayo Saka immediately, and that playing with different players in different positions, and Martinelli on the right-hand side, Havertz into midfield, and Jesus kind of playing this floating forward role, and that things would just be brilliant and we'd score 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 goals. Even that's what we would have liked to have seen, and certainly we were hoping that we might have seen in our preview yesterday. I think in reality we got given a bit of a reality check, and that it is going to take Arsenal a little bit of time before we find our feet without Bukayo. And I absolutely think that the January window has to be an area that we utilise, and we'll talk about that a bit more soon. But Martinelli takes over the right-hand side, and I think he had a decent game. I didn't think he was bad by any stretch of the imagination at all. He was obviously in part involved in the first goal. I thought defensively, he chased back well, as he always does on that right-hand side, and gave Timber additional support. And it was different for Timber to have a player who is, of course, right-footed. That said, I did feel like if Bukayo Saka was indeed on the right-hand side, that we would typically see more penetration, I think, down the right. I don't think he was bad at all. I wouldn't agree with anyone that would describe his performance as bad. I think it was probing. I think it was measured. And I think that it was a performance that will see growth. I find it nuts that Arsenal, and I'll use air quotes here, fans want to take the opportunity in Martinelli's first game starting on the right, which is a position, of course, that he's not used to playing, and go absolutely in on him. It's utterly madness to me that Arsenal fans, supporters, want to take what we saw yesterday and go hell for leather on his performance. It absolutely needs to be better. I'm not saying that it doesn't, but it's really odd. I find it so odd. And it's Arteta is right when he turns around, and remember that Amazon documentary we had where he says, not just the English media, but in particular fans of English clubs, we tend to just want to just absolutely kill these players as soon as they are, given this opportunity. Let's give the opportunity to see a little bit better if indeed it improves. I'm not saying it's the answer. I'm not saying that I don't want to see Ethan Nwaneri. Ethan Nwaneri was my starting option when I did the preview yesterday. But it's nuts to me how people want to kill this performance and incorrectly, by the way. I think he was decent. I think he had a decent game. And I think it's certainly worth those re-watching his performance to maybe get a better idea of how indeed he got on. But there's some good little interchanges of play. Of course, the goal comes from his cross on the right-hand side initially as well. Some good movement interchange of Gabriel Jesus as well. But suggesting that he had a bad game, I think is just, unfortunately, maybe something the victimhood of what he's replacing in Bukayo Saka. And I mean, when you get people in the chat box saying that Miles Lewis-Skelly needs to replace Saka, and that's the level of desperation we're getting to, my goodness me. Odegaard's has kind of got this new role in some ways because he's having to take on some of the responsibilities of Saka, Saka typically being our right-hand side corner taker. Well, Odegaard has assumed this role of being the corner taker for the right-hand side and being that left-footed option to swing the ball into the box. And he created a very good chance, perfectly driven ball to Declan Rice on the edge, who was unfortunate not to get a goal from his volley into the bottom left-hand corner. A good block. I think it was Clark that managed to get his foot in the way, or O'Shea, actually, it might have been, to block the strike. But Odegaard, particularly, I thought in the second half, improved. First half was a little bit off. Second half, I thought he really did improve into the game with the little interchanges of play. There was a lovely run he made into the box where he was unlucky not to score. Muric palming over his shot, having taken on about 4 Ipswich players before jumping into kind of the right half space, and really genuinely wanted to see him hit the back of the net because that would have been an absolutely unbelievable goal from him. But he too has got this new partner on the right-hand side. He too is having to deal with the fact that Saka is not going to be there for however long a time. And we are going to have to, I think, adapt to this. I'd like to see Odegaard score more goals from open play. That is definitely something that he needs to address, and certainly something that needs to be improved. And those numbers do need to be lifted in these coming weeks where we are without Saka. We need other players to step up. But we were rock solid at the back once again. A couple of times Ipswich did threaten on the counter towards the end of the game. They kind of grew into it. Amari Hutchinson was probably the most dangerous threat throughout the game. But Saliba and Gabriel. Saliba's been a little bit under pressure, I think, these last few weeks. I think Saliba has had a couple of shakes here and there, a couple of moments that have not necessarily filled me with confidence. But yesterday he was excellent and dealt with every single threat really, really well. Delap down that left-hand flank. He shepherded him very, very well indeed. Gabriel should have scored his chance from that left-hand corner. Brilliant delivery from Declan Rice, and you'd bank on Gabriel nodding that in 9 times out of 10. But sadly, he wasn't able to. But again, a really solid defensive performance. Timber and Lewis-Skelly performing well. Lewis-Skelly has a little bit of an edge to him, which I quite like. He got into kind of a couple of little scraps, to be honest, and I kind of like the edge. And he doesn't, he's 18 years of age. He's not going to be bullied. He stands up for his teammates. I quite like that. As a moment where Gabriel was kind of pushed off the field a little bit by Phillips at the end of the game, and Lewis-Skelly made Phillips know exactly how he felt and didn't back down from someone who's a lot more experienced than, of course, he is. So I quite like that, and I like the standing up for one another, of course, as well, of those teammates. But there is no question that this Arsenal team need reinforcements. We need to go into this market in January, and we need to add some players. I really do think that there's nowhere really to hide come the end of this transfer window. I don't care that there isn't a replacement yet in Fredu. I don't care that the money for a world-class marquee level signing isn't necessarily there either, but there is some money available, and Arsenal have to find a solution. They absolutely have to find an answer. When you're playing basically all the players that you have available to you and you're unable to put a single natural forward on the bench, I just think that cannot be something that continues, especially when, even though it seems that maybe Raheem Sterling's injury, there's some positive news around that, and it's not maybe as bad as what was thought, but still, Saka's absence is massive. We know that players like Trossard and Martinelli can suffer their own issues. Gabriel Jesus, we know we can't rely on his fitness either. We know that we are going to struggle with that, a natural right-sided player, for the moment, as we continue to kind of develop and adapt to these situations. We need to go into the market. We need to go and find that player. And I sincerely hope that it happens, because I just don't think there's any excuses when it comes to this window, and I don't think there is any defending the idea that Arsenal wouldn't sign anybody, because we've got 4 competitions that we're in. We've got opportunities to win the League Cup. We've got opportunities in the Champions League. We've got opportunities in the FA Cup, of course, and the Premier League is not yet done and dusted. So let's take hold of this and grab this season by the scruff of the neck and use the resources that are there and that we have made for ourselves from deadline day of the summer transfer window. I just want to end the first part of today's show with a highlight of mine, because as you can see from the shirt that I'm wearing, the Real Oviedo shirt with Santi Cazorla's name on the back, seeing him back at the Emirates was such a delight. Absolutely such a delight, and really enjoyed the kind of the fanfare around it. I saw some miserable old losers moaning about Santi Cazorla getting kind of this attention. For me, and I'm a younger fan. I say younger, I'm 30 now, but I'm the younger side of the fan base in terms of kind of the broader spectrum of supporters. And I know that the word legend gets thrown around a lot, and Nigel Mitchell, the stadium announcer, was referencing Santi Cazorla as a legend. And I know to some people, they don't count him as a legend personally. I mean, this guy helped win us 2 FA Cups in the 2010s, a period that was really difficult for Arsenal and a really kind of down period with loads of restrictions and a limited squad. And he was a big part of helping us win those trophies and dragging us out of that trophy drought that we'd been on for 9 years by that point. As a footballer, he's one of the most exciting players I've been able to see in the flesh, and he's one of the loveliest blokes, of course, as well. For me, Ramsey and Cazorla stand out as the only real legends of kind of the 2010 era where there was real struggles. And to me, he is. That doesn't mean that to you, he has to be a legend. It doesn't mean to me, to everybody, he has to be. And if you don't think he's a legend, that's your opinion and you're entitled to that view. But my goodness me, I hate it when people try and tell others what they can and cannot think in regards to who is and who isn't a legend in their mind. So I had a conversation with someone on social media yesterday saying, he's not a legend. I hate how he's getting us. First of all, I don't really get how the brain works when it annoys you so much that you need to take to social media to go and tell people that, that you think someone isn't a legend. I find that a really odd behavior. But then to go and tell people that it's a pure fact that he's not, it's your opinion, people. It's your opinion. It's opinions. It's subjective. I think the word legend is thrown around too much, but it's subjective. Don't tell people they can and can't call legends. It's your view. It's your opinion, and you're entitled to it. I really, really hope that this isn't the last time that we see Cazorla at the Emirates in even this capacity, but certainly more. I have real openness to seeing Cazorla returning to Arsenal in some capacity. And, he's obviously still playing right now at 40 years of age for Real Oviedo. He's made 18 appearances this season, believe it or not. But, it's brilliant to see him back at the club, and it was great seeing him after the game as well. Right, let's go to part 2 and your questions and thoughts and comments right after this. Okay, this is indeed part 2 of the show. We tackle some of your questions and more. Let's jump up into the chat and get some of these thoughts, which, despite the fact that Arsenal won, I've already been kind of glimpsed in the chat, and my goodness me, you'd think we would have lost yesterday. You really, really would. Franklin Goodwin says Martinelli played okay yesterday. He was average, but at least he was defensively good as well. Wayne says Arteta is trying to solve problems during games as he knows they won't spend the money, and they never do. We're at the final step again. Let's go. Akshat says he has been poor for the majority. This is Martinelli. He's been poor for the majority of the last 1.5 seasons. Machiavelli says he was poor. Say it as it is, which he wrote twice. Really wanted to get that point across. Rob says, totally agree. The negativity, it does my brain in. And Damien says, Odegaard needs to score more. Only one this season, and that was a penalty in the league. I'm not going to disagree there. He absolutely needs to score more. Tizer says Obi Martin should have stayed. He'd have got a game at this rate. I mean, I don't know about that. The guy's 16. He's not. I don't know if he's even broken into Man United's under 21s yet, has he? He was playing in their under 18 side. I'll do a quick check. Yeah, he's not even played for their under 21s. Yeah, has Obi Martin. And the guy is, as I said, 17 years of age, only just turned 17, so I don't think so. Manoj says, I've seen Ipswich against other top 6 teams and they haven't sat back like that against any of them. The discourse of our fans thinking that we could cut through them like butter without Saka is crazy. Steve says, I'm not understanding that views are classed either as positive or negative. Is there no room for balanced views? It's nuts, isn't it, Steve? Like, I feel like we remain pretty grounded as much as we can. We say when there needs to be criticism. We say when there needs to be praise. But my goodness me, there is a desperation from our fan base to be so glim and glum and it sucks. It really does suck because there's this expectation as well from the same people that Arsenal should be battering sides and Arsenal should be, blitzing teams. And it's just like this entitled expectation, despite the fact that we've lost our best player, our biggest goal contributor over the last 3 years. We've lost him. And there's this expectation that Arsenal are just going to click into action and score 15 goals against an Ipswich side that sat back in probably the deepest of low blocks that we've seen so far this season, especially in the first half. And thankfully, Kai Havertz's goal opened things up. And yes, we should, have scored a couple more goals than we managed to do yesterday. But it's nuts to me. Absolutely nuts to me, the negativity that is perpetuated through this fan base. Ty says, Tom, reading about hamstring surgery, it states that this can leave muscles change. Yeah, this is the bit I didn't really include in the first bit. I probably should have done. Arteta confirmed after the game that Bukayo Saka is going to be out for what he thinks at least more than 2 months. He has, it turns out, undergone surgery. It seems that this was a change over the last 24 hours and something different has indeed broken and happened. Not broken in terms of him, but broken in terms of the story. And that indeed he has indeed to have surgery. Now, yes, surgery can permanently affect things, but it can also permanently improve issues that would have otherwise got worse. We can't template issues. We can't template, other people's injuries onto Saka and expect them to be the same. It's impossible. Muscles heal differently for every single person. Surgeries go differently for every single person. So it's important that we don't overreact to this. We don't also know whether it is a grade 3 or a grade 2, because it might be that even a grade 2 tear has been decided to have surgery on it as well. So we don't know whether or not. Grade 2s can require surgery, but grade 3s always usually require surgery. So it's impossible to know either way on this end either. So I don't want to make conclusions on this that we don't know. But what we do know is, again, when this leans into kind of the transfer side of things, is that there's a real opportunity here for Arsenal to justify to a competitive player that can play on the right that you're going to get game time. Whereas before, and a lot of people have kind of asked the question and said, look, hey, Tom, Arteta's had years to sign a player to be cover for Saka, and he's not done. And the reality is that if you're saying that, you're ignoring a massive part of the conversation. The big part of the conversation is that you're forgetting is that the idea that any player would want to sit behind a Bukayo Saka that has been fit and available and ready and playing pretty much every single week up until this point, barring a couple of weeks out here and there, is just not realistic. But now with the Saka out, we have this gap, we have this absence, and for a significant period of time. So there is no excuse in terms of Arsenal not using this opportunity here to bring in a player that can offer that protection. And not only that, but Arteta has come out himself and said that, barring injury, they're looking internally for solutions, but they weren't expecting this injury. They weren't expecting this to Sterling or to Saka. And we need to make sure that we are utilising this opportunity as well to bring in a player that is competitive, that can offer us something. Now, I don't necessarily think Matheus Cunha is that player, that answer. I don't think he falls into that category. And I know that you can look at some left-sided players and you move Martinelli to right. I'd really like Arsenal to go into the market and add a player that plays majority of the time when in a wide area on the right-hand side. It's why I like Brian Mbeumo. In fact, I'm going to probably look into doing a show into all of the right-sided, left-footed players that I think could fit into what we want to see from that right-wing spot, because I think it's the position that most needs to be addressed right now. The striker thing can wait to the summer. I want to see Arsenal go into the market and add an attacking player that can play on the right, that's probably left-footed, that can invert, but can also use their right foot strongly as well. And this is an opportunity to do that. Brian Mbeumo, of course, stands out to me as an obvious candidate for a player that I'd like to see potentially given that opportunity. But whether or not he is available and realistic with the money that it would take to get him is obviously another thing. So yeah, let's wait and see what happens. Lee Buck says, Tommy boy, I might be the only one, but I enjoyed last night's performance more than the Palace game. That Palace game was scary. Obviously, we could have done better in the final third in terms of volume. I get what you're saying. Like, only other than the last 5 to 10 minutes did I feel that Arsenal were in danger, maybe. Other than that, it was complete control, complete dominance, utter and entire kind of attack versus defense. And to Arteta, that is how he wants things to be. That's what Arteta wants from games. He wants Arsenal to dominate teams. He wants Arsenal to control the game. And he wants Arsenal to be the worthy side in every single fixture that they play. Now, for everybody, that's not always feasible. For everybody, that's not always the answer. And I get that. I really do. I really do get it. I get the frustrations. I get the annoyances. And I get that people want to see Arsenal battering sides and blowing them away. And they're very critical when we don't. And the ironic thing is, of course, Mikel Arteta and Arsenal themselves have raised those standards themselves by getting, more goals than ever before in the Premier League last season. But sometimes you need to be able to look at what cost you last season and what the difference is this time around. Now, Arsenal, of course, have scored 35 goals this season so far, and we've got one more game before we reach the halfway mark. Now, last season, Arsenal scored 91 goals. The majority of those goals came in the second half of the season when Arsenal would drop points in just 2 games. And that is a reality, of course, that where right now, it doesn't look all that likely. Now, if you remember, I said that up until last season, or rather during last season, we can measure kind of where Arsenal's points tally was come the end of the year. And I haven't actually done the maths on this yet. And I wanted to do this live just so I like doing things live because it, I think, comes across a lot more genuine to do. Like, I've not prepared these things. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into 2023-24 and we're going to count the points that Arsenal had at the end of the year after. Well, how many games? Well, actually, we'll count the points they had after 17 games, which is obviously how many games Arsenal have played so far this season. 18 games. 18 games played, 10 wins, 6 draws, 2 losses. Arsenal have amassed 36 points after 18 games. So if we go to last season, and we count up the amount of points Arsenal had after 18 games. We started the season at against Nottingham Forest with a 3-0 win. So 3 there, 1-0 at Palace, 3 there. So that's 6. Draw with Fulham, 7. Win over Manchester United, 10. We're on game 4. I'm going to try and count at the same time as doing maths. So we're at 10. Win over Everton, 13. A draw with Spurs, 14. This is harder than I thought. I might have to use a calculator. Okay, we'll count the games on my hand and we'll do the points here. So 14 points after Spurs. Then we win over Bournemouth. So that's another 3 points, 7 games in. We then beat Manchester City in 8 games. That's another 3 points there. We draw with Chelsea in our 9th game. That's 1 point there. In our 10th game, it's a 5-0 win over Sheffield United. That's another win. Then a defeat to Newcastle United in our 11th game of the season. Then a win over Burnley, a 3-1 victory there. In our 12th game of the campaign. Wolves at home, we beat in our 13th game 2-1. And in our 14th game, we won just at Luton Town. Massive game that was, of course, in our 14th game of the season. In our 15th game of the season, we lost to Aston Villa. In our 16th game of the season, we beat Brighton. And in our 17th game of the season, we drew at Anfield. And then we lost in our 18th game to West Ham, which means that we were on 37 points after 18 games. Now, Arsenal are currently on 36 points after 18 games. Arsenal would then lose their next game after that. They would lose their 19th match of the season when they would play Fulham at Craven Cottage. And that was a very frustrating game. In fact, if we just go on to the BBC Sport report of that game, BBC report, it should give us, just so I know 100%, it should usually give us the table as it stands at that point. Full time, does it? I wish it would have done. I'm not sure it's going to. No, 2023. I don't know how many points Arsenal would have been on after 19 games. Fulham 13th. Yep. Blah 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 blah. That has to have been the 19th game, right? Yeah, I think so. So 37 points after 18 games last season. Arsenal are currently on 36 points after 18 games. Arsenal would lose their 19th match of the season against Fulham, which means after 19 games, they were on 37 points. If Arsenal win their 19th game of the season against Brentford, we will be on 39 points. 2 points better off after 19 games. I am going to do one more check. I just want to make sure that's 100% right by counting out these games very quickly. I know this is riveting viewing me doing counting, but 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 West Ham. West Ham was the 19th game. Let's go backwards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Okay. So the West Ham game was the 19th game. So by that 19th game, we had 37 points. The Fulham game was the 20th game. So after 20 matches, Arsenal were on 37 points. So if Arsenal were to win their next 2 games, which would be against Brentford and then Brighton. If Arsenal win their next 2 games, both away from home, not easy fixtures, they'll be on 42 points. So after 20 games, we could be 5 points better off this season compared to last season. Rob says, Tom showing why we should rethink doing the live show thing. Does that not make sense, though? Does that not give a little bit of clarity to where we are? That after 20 games last season, Arsenal were on 37 points. And then this season, if Arsenal were to win their next 2 games to get up to that 20-game mark, they could be on 42. Is that not an interesting stat? I think that it is. I think that is quite interesting. Mr. Thugi says the Premier League websites lets you go back every game week. Does it actually? Oh, you're right. It does. I've been doing all this maths, and Mr. Thugi comes along and tells me that I didn't even have to do any of that. So yeah, at 18 games last season, Arsenal were on. No, hold on. I've done the maths wrong. At 18 games last season, Arsenal were on 40 points. Right. After 20 games, they were on 40 points. So here's the correct maths. Ignore everything I just said over the last 5 minutes. If Arsenal win their next 2 games, if we win our next 2 games, we'll be 2 points. 2 points better off. And it's an if. And as our resident pessimist Jimmy points out in the chat, it is if. We have to win at Brentford. We have to win at Brighton. And if we win those 2 games, we're 2 points better off after 20 games. There we go. Maths done. Goodness gracious me, that was harder than it was meant to be. I can tell you that right now, after 18 games, Arsenal are 3 points worse off so far this season. At the same point last season, we were on 40 points. We were top of the league on 40 points. And after 20 games, we remained on those 40 points because we lost to West Ham and we lost to Fulham. So, yeah, there we go. Gooner says, wasn't you a maths teacher? No, wasn't a maths teacher. Was a geography teacher, mate. So, and I mean, you never use any maths in geography, do you? Let's scroll up, shall we? Akin Toby says, should we not expect more goals from Odegaard than we're getting? It seems that his finishing ability has regressed a lot this season. He's getting into good positions, but just can't seem to score them. I think coming back from that injury has definitely affected him quite an amount, and we need to see more goals we absolutely need to see more goals when it comes to Odegaard, and I think he's going to be aware of that more than anyone. So don't believe for a second that he's not going to be there. Tyers says, Tom, I see your point, but can we go on a similar run with our best player and Trossard and Martinelli and Jesus struggling for form? Reinforcements are needed in a big way. Do we have to buy to sell? We don't have to buy to. We don't have to buy to sell. Sorry, we don't have to sell to buy. Unless it's for like a major player, which I just don't see happening. I don't see us having a major sale in January anyway. So, and I don't think we can afford to sell any players, to be honest. Only Tierney maybe. But other than that, I don't see who we're selling to bring in any money. Maybe Zinchenko at a push, or Kivior, maybe. I don't think that brings in enough money, though. M. Dot says, I'm a bit behind on the stream, but you're not looking for the word legend, cult hero is what you're looking for. I mean, for you, maybe. Santi Cazorla's a legend to me. Franklin says, Tom, is Jagrova of Lille good enough to deputise for Saka now until he's back? He's better than Martinelli on the right and is valued at around £25 million. We have been in for him 2 years ago when he was only £7 million. Edon Dragova is a player that I've continued to kind of register some interest in and have mentioned him in some articles about players on the right-hand side. He does do well in taking players on. He sits in the 93rd percentile of successful take-ons for wingers, and he sits with non-penalty goals in the 76th percentile for a Lille side that have done pretty well, to be fair, so far, and have been carried quite a lot by Jonathan David, of course. I'm not sure whether or not he is the guy, though. I'm not sure Jagrova is the guy, but I think it's a case of, again, him or nobody. Bringing somebody like him in January could be a help to our options on that right-hand side of the field. Chidozi says Gabriel Peck is almost perfect as a player for a backup to Saka. He's left-footed, he's a right winger, and he's Brazilian. Now, Gabriel Peck has, of course, been linked with Arsenal before. He is now 23 years of age, and he's been playing in the MLS for quite some time, but he did score a very impressive 16 goals and 14 assists in the MLS as the LA Galaxy lifted that MLS trophy during the previous campaign. I think that it's asking a lot of a player to come and move to the Premier League from the MLS, but that said, we have seen some players of late move from the MLS and do very well. John Duran, of course, stands out as one of the big examples of a player who can make the transition to the Premier League from the MLS and perform very well indeed. We've seen Alphonso Davies, of course, do the same thing with Bayern Munich. We've seen Miguel Almiron, after a period of time and adjustment, finally come good, but of course has since trailed off from that point forward. There's one other as well. I'm sure there's another name that I'm escaping that in recent years has moved to the moved from MLS and has done very, very well in Europe. Maybe someone in the chat box will remind me who it is. But John Duran and Miguel Almiron, of course, are the two Premier League examples that have done decently. Yeah, Gabriel Peck. And he fits into Gabriel FC, as Mike points out as well, which is always a good thing. Rev San says, hi, Tom. The maths that you just did technically shows that we haven't really improved compared to last season, despite signing a few players. What do you think is the reason for this? I mean, as I said, if we win our next two games, which are games, of course, that Arsenal did win last season, away at Brighton and away at Brentford, we will have improved by 2 points come that same stage. I also think it's worth pointing out that Arsenal have played trickier games this season than they had at the same stage last season. They had not yet gone to Spurs by this point. They have this season gone to Villa Park and won. Of course, they've gone to the Etihad already during this half of the season where they hadn't done at the same stage last season. They have been in a position, I think, where they've played some trickier fixtures this time around than they did last time. So I think that also comes into kind of this conversation as well. So it's worth factoring that. If you look at kind of the teams that Arsenal have played away from home and you look at the table as well, it's quite good reading for Arsenal. We've got some tricky games. We've gone to Bournemouth, of course, who are having a very, very good season indeed so far. They've been to Stamford Bridge. They've been to St James's Park. They've been to Manchester City. They've been to Fulham. They've been to Villa. And all of those teams sit in the top half of the table. In fact, we've played of the 9 teams that sit in the top half other than ourselves, we've gone to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of the 9 teams in the top half of the table we have already played away from home during this first half of the campaign. In the bottom 10 teams, we get to go away to Brentford. We haven't been away yet to Manchester United, to Everton, to Wolves, to Leicester, to Ipswich, or Southampton. We've got to play the bottom 4 teams away from home still, which obviously will be, I think, another argument as well. O'Malley says we've played almost every London derby away from home also already this season. West Ham away from home, Spurs away from home, Chelsea away from home. Who am I forgetting? We've still got to play Brentford, but of course that's coming up very soon as well. Wolf says, let's be fair, unless we're prepared to pay top money, no club will want to sell their top players in January, especially if they're in Europe. You're absolutely right. J Knott says, if we don't win anything significant soon, players will leave. What's the point in hanging around winning nothing? Because you're competing for them, Jay. Arsenal are in the fold for every single competition that they enter because of where we are. And when Arsenal enter a competition, Arsenal have got a good chance of winning it. Yes, we haven't so far since the FA Cup, but only so many teams can win them, and they've pretty much been dominated by a very small number of clubs. And so the players will stay because Arsenal continue to compete for those cups. So I'm not concerned about that. I think that's something that's a little bit overblown. Fulham away from home as well. Thank you, O'Malley and Soup, for pointing that out as well. Wolf says, Grandaddy Gooner says, good morning, Tom. Good morning to Gooners. I'm a bit late, so I'm starting from the beginning. Question, do you think Miles Lewis-Skelly makes the next England squads? That's a big question, isn't it? Because England have lacked left-backs. England have not had left-backs available to them. It's a position that has been notoriously quite low in the number of options that we've got. If Lewis-Skelly solidifies that left back spot, I don't think that Thomas Tuchel would have anything other than any excuse not to think about Lewis-Skelly for an England call-up. But we're a long way from that. I think he would have to establish himself up till that March international break before Miles Lewis-Skelly gets that position. And O'Malley says if Rico Lewis made it, I don't see why Miles Lewis-Skelly couldn't. Osborne says, well said about Martinelli. Many of these Arsenal fans are just plain delusional. I don't think it's about being delusional, Osborne. I hate that term. I'm not a fan of it. I think it's a really lazy word. And I'm not saying you're lazy. I'm just not a big fan of it. I think the delusion thing is someone says that when they can't actively explain why they disagree with someone else. They're like, oh, you're deluded. You're so deluded. You're delusional. Why? I don't know, you're deluded. That's usually what you get. It's a lazy response quite often, and it usually comes from people that can't actively explain away why they don't agree with the person that they are disagreeing with. I don't think it's delusion. I think that there is a lean on pessimism quite a lot, as a lean on frustration, and I think there's a lot of emphasis on the fact about I think there's a lot of leaning on kind of, rival fans and the banter that comes from rival fans. I think people focus far too much on what rival fans are saying about Arsenal. Arsenal are in an incredibly good position right now as a club. We are back amongst the elite clubs. We're back competing on all fronts. We're back considered to be title challengers. And I've enjoyed so much of this last 5 years in the progression of Arsenal Football Club, and I'm not taking it for granted. And I refuse to take it for granted at all. PW says Fulham's Anthony Robertson is a great left back. He's also an American international, so won't be considered for that England squad. Stephen says, plus I felt they targeted our young left backs who stood up very well indeed. I agree with you. Ravsan says, is there a chance that we recall Nelson or Vieira if we can't afford to sign anyone on loan? No, I don't think so. Vieira will be with Porto until the end of the season. Nelson is currently injured, so I don't think that's going to happen. Lee Bucks says, Tommy Boy, what kind of football content do you think is missing from YouTube at the moment? I'm trying to get involved. That's the impossible question. It's so busy, it's so hectic in the world of content creation that finding the niche, finding the gap is what sets you apart. So I'm afraid I can't really help you with that, Lee Bucks. Not because I don't want to, but because if there was a gap, I'd be finding it myself. But we are very much in our grounded lane right now. Non-flying Iceman says pessimism and defeatist attitudes are still ingrained due to Arsene Wenger's arrogance near the end and a refusal to change. I don't think that comes from that. I don't think it's a defeatist attitude or pessimism because of Arsene Wenger's tenure. I don't think there's a defeatist attitude amongst Arsenal fans at all. No, I think if anything, there's actually more of an arrogance that perpetuates through the fan base, an entitlement, than there is a defeatist attitude. There's definitely a pessimism. There's definitely a lean from many fans to look to the negative before appreciating what they already have. So yes, Ty says a niche could be a good show on women's football, like we do for the men's. I mean, Arsblog has you very well covered when it comes to the women's game, and has brilliant coverage of the women's side of the sport as well. Temi says, Tom, can you address Havertz starting in midfield over Marino? And is this proof that Marino is not good enough or not rated by the manager? No, not at all. Havertz, over the last couple of games, has performed well, I think, in that midfield role. Marino, of course, as I've said to you many, many times, has had this missing of pre-season, had the significant injury at the beginning of the campaign, and is this season going to be catching up. He's in this process of transition. He's catching up to everybody else. And I think Havertz and Jesus dovetailed really well yesterday. And there was a lot of really good movement from both of them. There was a lot of unpredictability about where they were on the field, and that confused Ipswich quite a lot. And I think both of them contributed to the result. So let's wait and see what happens. Maximia says, what's your view on Lamine Camara from Monaco? I mean, in terms of like that position, I'm not sure that's really what we're looking for. As far as I'm aware, he's more of a midfielder, is he not? So I don't see that being the answer for Arsenal right now. We need to be looking at bringing in that right-sided attacker if we're going to prioritise anybody during this upcoming window. Carl says, I watched the match in a Manchester pub. No sound, no fan noise, no commentary. It was a different perspective. Even the Man City fans were giving reluctant praise to what they saw. Akintobi says, I think starting Havertz over Marino is just a way for Arteta to improve our goal scoring chances with Saka out. I love Marino, but he won't be in those positions where Havertz scored. I think Marino does get forward, but I think he showed that when he came on, actually, ironically. He had that really good opportunity that was well saved by Muric. I think he does get into the box. But I do agree with you, Akintobi, that I think Havertz's midfield positioning is a lot to do with, of course, a need to try and score more goals. And he scored. So it worked to a degree. Ian says the gap maybe is actual data science research in football rather than just preliminary stat tables on why those definitions are important and what stats need to improve individually on a team basis. I think the biggest stat that needs to improve overall in this Arsenal team is our finishing. And this is not something that we've exactly got. It's not new, is it? It's not new at all. We've known that our finishing needs to be better. And last season, even though we scored a record number of goals, we still felt like in big games that we missed some big chances. You think about the Trossard chance against Aston Villa that could have won us the league when you look back on it. 0-0, Trossard from, nowhere in terms of a distance out from goal has a great chance to score and doesn't. I think about the opportunities we had at Liverpool. I think about the few chances that Gabriel Jesus had at the Etihad that we didn't take. I think about the game against Bayern Munich that we had opportunities that we didn't take as well. I think finishing remains our biggest problem. And we have had chances against Everton and not scored. We had chances against Fulham and didn't score. Finishing remains, for me, the biggest difference between where Arsenal are right now and where Arsenal need to be to win a league. And that's why, again, I think when it comes to attacking options, we need to invest there. And that's why the January window and the subsequent summer transfer window is going to be the biggest part of Arsenal's future. EK says, does Arteta have a plan B if Arsenal can't break down teams with Odegaard controlling the play? It seems that we're doomed. Yes. Set pieces is a huge part of what else we have in our arsenal of attacking options. And people laugh at that. But I'm sorry, you shouldn't. Because Arsenal having and being as good at set pieces as we are makes us very dangerous and have that extra element to our attack. I've never quite understood the whole set piece comedy. I mean, it's something that fans of other teams, of course, have pointed to with a little bit of a Stokey jokeness about it. But they're the ones that keep losing to us because we keep scoring set pieces against them. You can stop our dominance. You can stop our little tiki-taka football if you like. But then we'll just go and score from a corner. I don't think there's anyone to sniff at. I really don't get it. I don't get the arrogance there of anybody laughing at Arsenal's set pieces. because they've become a massive weapon for us and a huge part of why we have been so successful and been able to beat teams that otherwise we may not have beaten. Michael says defeatism. Yes, some patch of our fan bases are this way, but entitlement, no way. To what exactly? What have we to show for this entitlement? I mean, we have to show the fact that, Michael, over the last 5 years, we've risen again to a side that have competed at the forefront of the league, get into the Champions League quarterfinals for the first time in 14 years. I cannot look at football in a binary way like some of you do. I can't, and I don't. It's not out of choice. It's just not the way my brain works. It's not a case of trophy is success, everything else is failure. I don't look at football that way because I don't think you can look at football that way. Because if you look at football in such a binary fashion like that, you're never gonna. I think your appreciation for the sport is just never going to be as it should be. And secondly, you're never going to find establishment of progression. You're never going to find yourself going to be in the best possible place you can be as a club. And what Arsenal have done over these last 5 years is progress to, a place where they've not been for like 20 odd years, close to 2 decades. So that's why I'm just not going to look at football in the binary way that some others choose to, and I don't want to. Fred says, any words on Kaya leaving at Football London, mate? Shame to see him leave. Yeah, it is. And obviously I've been working with Kaya for a number of years now at Football London. He's going on to do some big things, which I'm sure he'll announce in his own time. And you'll all see what he's going off to do. But it's been a pleasure to share the press box with him. And I've learned a lot, and he's helped me in many, many ways. And I sincerely wish him all the best moving forwards from Football.London and with what is to come next. So yeah, it was his last game in the press box yesterday with us, and I look forward to seeing him again soon, I'm sure. Ian says, okay, why is finishing still lacking? Is it a shooting angles thing, shooting distances, players, mental state in front of goals? Is that attacking patterns? I mean, you've got to factor in the opponent as well, Ian, haven't you? Obviously, teams are defending differently against us these days. I mean, 3 years ago, Arsenal got a lot more chances with a lot more space. Now teams sit back a lot against us and defend deep and try to set up to get a point. Whereas before that wasn't the case, and that makes chances much harder to come by. You have a lot less time, a lot less space for those chances. So I think that definitely factors in to a degree as well. And Jay Knott says, a goal is a goal, set piece or not. Exactly. Rich says, Tom, I love Miles Lewis-Skelly, but apart from bite, what's he adding to the left back that Calafiori isn't? Calafiori seems to have more ability to produce magic. I mean, his passing is very good, Rich. I don't know if you've been able to watch too much of Miles Lewis-Skelly's passing, but it's very, very good. Some really good line-breaking passes we see at times that left-hand side. Look, Calafiori is a better player, and I think Calafiori will gradually take back that position. But Miles Lewis-Skelly, for an 18-year-old, what he's producing at this level is very, very impressive indeed. His passing accuracy has been excellent. 91% against Palace, 96.7 against Everton. He came on against Man City with 100% pass accuracy. His passing's very good. Very, very good indeed. He carries the ball well. He had 45 carries against Everton in the draw at home against them. So in possession, he's also very strong and confident. He's also good in tight spaces. He can take players on. He gets out of little problems quite easily. I think Miles Lewis-Skelly offers a lot to this team. He's a different type of player to Calafiori. Technically, he's better, I think, than Calafiori. And I think that offers you something in terms of that inverted role that Arteta has liked to utilise as well. EK says, nothing wrong with set pieces, but we should be able to try something different. It could be a quick balls through the middle, long balls over the top. We do that as well. Gabriel Jesus very nearly created a really good opportunity with a long ball over the top. I think it was Rice that played it the first half. Long ball over the top to Jesus. Cross to Trossard. Should have scored. Lays off to Odegaard. It was a poor pass to Odegaard. Had it been a better pass, he would have been in a position to potentially score as well. So we do long balls. So think about the goal we scored against West Ham. Long ball over the top to Kai Havertz. Think about the goal that we scored against Monaco. Was it Monaco? No, Palace in the League Cup. Long ball through to Jesus. I'm sorry, but I don't agree, Ike. I think there is variation in what goals we're scoring. There's loads of different types of goals that we're scoring at the moment. All from open play, by the way, as well. So I've not seen our open play merchant in the chat for a while, have you? Anyway, that brings us to the end of today's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. Always very much appreciate you being here. Sorry for the maths meltdown earlier on. I think we've all come to a realization of actually where we are now. And I think we do know the maths of where it sits for us. Arsenal will indeed be 1 point worse off at the halfway mark if they win against Brentford compared to last season. But if they do beat Brighton in their second successive game of the new year, they will be 2 points better off at the same stage. So that gives you a bit of context of where Arsenal are in comparison to last season right now. And I think also brings us plenty of more to think about. I'll be back with you, of course, tomorrow morning, bright and early, looking ahead to the last few days of 2024 and looking ahead, of course, to the January transfer window. Arsenal's next game is on New Year's Day against Brentford. There is no press conference from Mikel Arteta ahead of that game. He did speak about the Brentford game after yesterday's match, and that those comments will be coming out in a couple of days' time. But other than that, it's going to be a bit quiet unless there's some transfer stuff to talk about. I look forward to seeing that and plenty more. But stay safe, stay well, stay happy and respectful. And as always, up the Arsenal.